Welcome back to Are You Smarter Than a Libertarian? The only show bold enough to ask why the government keeps demanding more money from the people already funding this entire circus. I'm your host, Jeff. Today we are tackling one of the hottest and most misunderstood debates in American politics. Who actually pays federal income taxes, and why are we still arguing that the wealthy do not pay their fair share, as Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Elizabeth Warren, or as I like to call her, Pocahontas, when the data tells a completely different story that they do actually pay more than their fair share, and the bottom 50% actually pay almost nothing. Now, let's be real. If this episode triggers your inner socialist, your inner crybaby, stay with me because you may accidentally learn something. I'm not sure if you will, but I'm putting the information out there. Do with it as you please, because it makes me no difference. Let's do it. Let's go over the first thing first. The facts the media hates talking about, especially the leftist media, your MSNBCs or MS Now or CNN, whatever BS they're calling themselves. We all know what it is. Same thing with PBS. Let's start with the part everyone claims to know, but almost nobody actually understands it. And you have to understand something if you want to speak on something. Federal income taxes in the United States are already amongst the most progressive in the world. And I don't mean progressive like rainbow flags and HR training videos and sensitivity. Progressive, as in the people who make the most money pay the most taxes by a country mile. I know, you listen to the left, the people who make the most money don't actually pay the most. But it's disingenuous if they argue it any other way. Now, let's go right to the source, the monster itself, the IRS. And here are the numbers for tax year 2022. And this is the freshest full data set we have as of 2025. Now, in a couple of years, we'll have statistics for this year, which I may come back and do another video showing you how it is even more expanded now. The top 10% of earners, and if you think the top 10% of earners are millionaires, you would be sorely mistaken. You'd be sorely mistaken. That means anyone making at least $178,611 in adjusted gross income. They earned 48% of all income, but paid 72% of all federal income taxes. That is $1.5 trillion out of 2.1 trillion total. Now, let's get to the most vilified group, the top 1%. The group everyone loves to villainize earned 26% of the income, but paid 40% of all income taxes. I mean, wow, you don't think the wealthy pay their fair share? But let's get into the rebates and everything else and show why they actually pay more than their fair share. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of earners earned 11.5% of income and paid only 3% of income taxes. The bottom 50%, their average effective tax rate is 3.7%. And many receive net refunds because of refundable credits like the Earned Income Credit and the Child Tax Credit. See, this is what people don't want to talk about is percentages. They want to talk about total dollar amounts, but not percentages. When you deal with the percentages, it becomes a different story. Now, let me repeat this. For every one of you socialists in the back and the people that say tax the rich and eat the rich, half the country pays almost nothing into federal income taxes. The other half pays everything. And within that paying half, the top 10% pay almost 3/4 of the bill. So the person getting a huge refund, this is hourly worker or salary worker, congratulations, you get a refund every year. Me as a business owner, I don't get a refund. I usually end up having to pay. So whenever you hear someone on TV say the rich need to pay their fair share, like anyone on the left side of the political spectrum, remember that the IRS is somewhere in the corner laughing at you, realizing how truly stupid you are and how you don't understand facts. Now, you may be asking that if you're shocked by this revelation, why the burden is so concentrated on the top 50% of earners in this country. Now, let's get into how did we get here? And there are a few key drivers that got us to this point. And it's really interesting when you start to think about it. We start with graduated tax brackets. High earners face marginal rates up to 37%. Add in phase outs for deductions and credits, and the tax code basically turns into a video game where the difficulty jumps every time you level up in the game. And after a certain point, you don't want to level up anymore. Like, that's why a lot of CEOs only make $82,000 a year, because that's the sweet spot in the tax income for them. Next is income inequality. Everyone screams about income inequality. The top 10% take home almost half of all market income. So naturally, they shoulder most of the tax load. I know, shocking, right? To the socialists and the leftists, they don't understand that part of it. They scream what sounds nice and gets everyone in their emotions, but emotions make poor policies. Then we have the massive standard deduction combined with refundable credits. That zeroes out tax liability for tens of millions of Americans who are low income and middle income households. I know all these deductions and credits zero out what you pay in the tax every year. So honestly, you kind of need to shut up. Finally, the surtaxes. The 3.8% net investment income tax, the alternative minimum tax, and the old PEP and PISA limitations. Every one of these falls overwhelmingly on high income earners. So, with this information so far in the video, how can you say logically that the wealthy don't pay their fair share? And this is not an accident. The system is designed to extract as much as possible from the people at the top. And yet, the political class that produces no consumable goods other than more debt, which we can't even really sell, still insists that it is not enough. They don't pay their fair share because it sounds great for elections. Now, let's get into why raising taxes on the top 10% might backfire. And for those of you saying that we need to have a tax rate like we had in the 60s, well, we had a manufacturing base in the 50s and 60s. So just that doesn't carry over to today because we don't really have a manufacturing base anymore. We're not a net exporter anymore, we're a net importer. Even with all that, progressives keep saying it is time to soak the rich even harder. You know, they got to get that pounding in, but the pounding is not what you think it is. They'll say raise the top rate to 39.6, slap a 70% tax bracket. How about a millionaire wealth tax proposed by Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Pocahontas? Why not tax every dollar Jeff Bezos has ever looked at? I mean, that would just be so great, wouldn't it? No. Most of the billionaires' wealth is illiquid, not readily transferable. But here's the problem. I know you on the left don't like this, but economists across the political spectrum agree that high earners change behavior when you raise taxes. Who would have thought that? Chicago does it. People change how they spend. This is not a libertarian fan fiction. This is Assayas, Sumrad, and Gertz, some of the most respected tax economists on earth, and I'm citing their study. So let's just remember this, that We're going to get into some economic terms. The elasticity of taxable income for top earners is between zero point 0.2 and zero point 0.7. For those of you who don't know, understand, the translation for this is between 27 and 48% of expected revenue from a tax hike disappears. People work less, invest less, move money around, or literally move themselves to a lower tax environment. New York City's figuring that out real quick. California's figured that out. I'm leaving Illinois to go to Wyoming with my business because it's a better tax environment for me. Now, the next point is economic growth. Higher marginal tax rate hit entrepreneurship, innovation, and you may not like this term, human capital investment. Even left-leaning economists like Romer admits this. The government needs the economy to grow in order to have a tax base to loot, which at the end of the day, income tax is just looting. It's the false Robin Hood analogy. Killing growth to chase more revenue is like burning down your house to just stay warm. It sounds great, but it's the most idiotic thing you can do. But we know people on the left and some on the right are not the brightest bulbs in the box. Then there is the revenue problem. Even Biden's giant 2021 and 2022 tax proposal was only projected to raise about 1.5% of GDP over 10 years. That is nowhere near enough to fund the programs politicians keep promising people. Here's a little anecdote. You could take the wealth of every millionaire and billionaire and you would not even fund the government for 1 year. So congratulations, you destroyed the production of a country and you don't even get to fund it for 1 year. That's why everything's a trade-off and there's no such thing as a free lunch. And lastly, the politics. Tax the rich polls well. Even Republicans in swing states say it sounds great, but they're economically illiterate. But when Democrats actually control Congress, most of these proposals die immediately. Now you might be wondering, why do they die immediately, Jeff? Moderate Democrats, donors, and affluent blue state professionals do not actually want to pay more. They just want someone else to pay more. Because here's a little secret. You can write a check to the IRS for more than you owe, and they will gladly cash it and put it in the revenue. Better alternatives that still make high earners pay most of the taxes, which, if you're a leftist, that's kind of what you want. But you don't really want to do the work and you don't want to sit and have to deal with how you would implement this, because that's what the left loves to do. They love these great ideas, but then they have no idea how to implement them. And now here's where libertarians shine. You do not need crazy 37 or 70% rates to make the rich pay the vast majority of taxes. They already do. There are two reform ideas that outperform the current system without wrecking the economy. And I have a third that I will talk about at the end. So let's get into what these actually are. Option 1, a flat tax with a big exemption. Think of a single rate around 19 to 23%. No deduction except a generous family allowance between $40,000 and $60,000. Now we're going to show an example. Estonia has done this since 1994. Russia did it in 2001 and saw revenue triple in just 4 years. In every case, the top 10% still paid between 70 and 80% of the taxes because loopholes vanished. See, that's what politicians won't do. They won't close the loopholes because it benefits them. Now, here's the second option, a national consumption tax. Slightly better in my eyes, but not the most correct one for me. Most modern countries rely on VATs, a broad-based sales tax between 12 and 22%, but they also have high income taxes as well. Or a fair tax style system with a prebate that sends every household a monthly credit for basic living expenses. Yet again, I still don't like this idea because you're sending money to people that the government doesn't have. Because wealthy save more than they spend, their effective tax rate on total income is higher than the middle class. Fair tax simulations show the top 10% would pay about 82% of the net burden. But we have a spending problem in this country. We have an entitlement system problem in this country that needs to be reformed, but no one on either side really wants to tackle it head on because it's not red meat for their voting base. Now, let's go to example. Everyone loves to talk about the Nordic countries. They actually have a more free economic system than we do, apparently. Denmark has a 25% VAT tax and a flatter income tax. Their top decimal still pays around two-thirds of total revenue, but Denmark doesn't have near the expenditures we do because we pay for their defense. Now, with this, you would get simpler taxes, fewer loopholes, and less distortion, and the rich still shoulder the majority of the cost. The difference is that the incentives are healthier and the economy, it grows instead of suffocating. But that's what people don't understand on the left is when you increase taxes, you naturally suffocate the economy. Look at any state that does it. Look at Illinois, losing people, losing businesses. Now, this is the libertarian bottom line. I am a libertarian slash voluntary consumerist. I don't necessarily agree with the libertarian position on this, but we have to go with what the data says, even though I personally have a totally different idea. The data tells a story that politicians refuse to admit to themselves or to the population because they realize that, oh, they wouldn't vote for me. And everyone is ultimately self interested at the end of the day. And we just need to accept that. The rich already pay most of the bills. They pay because they earn a large share of total income and because the system is designed to squeeze them harder than anyone else. Raising tax rates does not magically generate trillions because you don't even have people that make, you don't even have all the millionaires and billionaires put together totaling even $1.5 trillion. It just, this doesn't generate revenue in the trillions, it just punishes growth and accelerates avoidance while delivering only modest new revenue. People figure out how to move their money around. If you actually want a fair, efficient, and sustainable tax system, the answer is not to crank the top bracket to infinity. The answer is a better design. A flat tax or a national consumption tax can generate the same or more revenue while keeping the economy stronger and the tax code simpler. Now, we're going to get into what I personally believe. I personally believe in getting rid of every tax that exists but an excise tax. That basically would be you create a tax at like food, clothing, shelter, there's no tax on it. Automobile, first automobile, no tax on. Any other cars other than that, you pay a tax. It's graduated. The more you spend, the more you pay. But you're not taxed 4 or 5 times like with the income tax we have now. Then you pay a sales tax. Then you pay this tax, that tax, every other tax. So your money's taxed 5, 6 times before you get what you really have. But this idea is not nearly as fun for politicians as screaming tax the rich on TikTok and other leftists over there screaming it too. It's ultimately stupid and it's just rage bait. Now, if you learned something today, congratulations. You might be smarter than a libertarian. If you got angry, congratulations. You might want to run for Congress in 2026, but most progressives don't want to do that because they can't get the main party's vote. If you like this, please like, comment, subscribe, and share, and follow and leave a review. I am on YouTube, TikTok, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. And as always, thank you for watching. See you all next Monday. Stay free, stay informed, and stay accountable.